This lesson is our introduction to the topic of probability. So probability is included in the M5, 6, 7 and 8 series exams on your GCSE maths. Probability is defined as the likelihood of an event occurring. In this session we're going to look at the very basics of what we might come across in the test. So firstly, we're going to look at how we can describe probabilities. Probabilities can be described in several different ways, either using words, percentages, decimals or fractions. So first off, just to cover the idea of describing probabilities using words. My advice is to only use words when encouraged to do so within an exam situation, and the reason being is that some of these words do not give a specific probability. Okay, so again, just to recap on the description, we're talking about the likelihood of an event occurring. Some events have a very specific probability. So if I use the example of flipping a coin has two outcomes with two very specific probabilities. So as in a 50% chance of getting a head or a 50% chance of getting a tail. So we describe that using the word even. So evens as a word, or sometimes you'll hear people use the term 50-50. Please keep in mind 50-50 or using that as a description is not describing it as a fraction. Evens or 50-50 means you have a 50% chance. It is very specific. Equally, the words impossible or certain also have very specific meaning. So if something is impossible, there's absolutely no way that it could happen. So say for example, today is Monday. It is totally impossible that the day or tomorrow will be a Wednesday. So that will be an impossible type of event. When we look at the word certain, on the other hand, certain means something definitely will happen. So again, if today is Monday, then tomorrow it certainly will be Tuesday. So it is a certainty that tomorrow will be a Tuesday. The words unlikely and likely, on the other hand, are quite vague in their meaning. So unlikely could be anything from very unlikely. So if I talked about the probability of winning the lottery is an extremely unlikely event to happen, but of course it could happen. It's a 1 in a million probability. But also I could use that word unlikely to describe, say, rolling a dice and getting a 5. So there's 1 5 on a dice, there's a 1 in 6 chance. It's unlikely in one go I would get a 5 just in that one go, but I wouldn't say it is anywhere near as unlikely getting a 5 on a dice as it is to winning the lottery. So what I mean by that there when we talk about unlikely is that it covers a broad range numerically of possibilities. Similarly with likely. So likely also covers that broad range of anything after a 50-50 chance, an even chance, right up to a near certainty. So again, only use words when prompted to do so in an exam situation. The better way to describe probabilities is using either percentages, decimals or fractions. So percentages, when we talk about a 0% chance, that of course means impossible, all the way up to 100% chance, which means certain. 50%, much like the word, is a 50-50 or an even chance. Anything between 0 and 50 is in the unlikely range. Anything between 50 and 100% is in the likely range of happening. We can also use decimals, and again, decimals are just, if we think of them in terms of the percentage equivalent. So the impossible chance of something happening is 0.0, evens is 0.5 and certain is 1.0. Unlikely again falls in that range of 0.01 up to 0.49, anywhere between impossible and evens, and likely of course anything between evens and certain as well. Fractions also, we can use them, and they're, in my opinion, the easiest way to describe certain possibilities and probabilities of events happening, and we're going to look at that later in this lesson also. So fractions, 0 if it's an impossible that something's going to happen, a half. So again, we used that example earlier of a coin. You have a half a chance of getting a head or a half a chance of getting a tail, or 1 if something is certain. And you can have fractions, of course, in between where we talk about unlikely and likely, of course, also. So we have a very basic formula when we want to look at writing a probability as a fraction. And basically what that means is here when we want to describe a probability as a fraction, it is simply the number of successful outcomes divided by the total outcomes. So we're going to look at some very, very basic examples just to put that into practice. So if I was asked these questions, what is the probability of getting ahead when I flip a coin? So if we think of that formula, the number of successful outcomes, so the only successful outcome I have is I have one head on a coin, so the probability is therefore that one chance over the total outcomes. There are two outcomes on a coin, heads and tails, so 1 over 2. So again, describing a probability as a fraction is, in my opinion, one of the easiest ways to describe probabilities. The second question here, what is the probability of getting a 2 when I roll a dice? So a dice in total has 6 sides, and there is 1 2 on a dice, so it is a 1 in 6 chance. And equally, if I was to look at this third example again, when we talk about a dice, what is the probability of getting an even number when I roll a dice? So how many even numbers are on a dice? So a dice goes from 1 to 6, so we have 2, 4 and 6. Therefore we have 3 successful possible outcomes over a total of 6, so 3 over 6. Now, just to point something out as well, quite often fraction-based questions in your GCSE maths you're asked to simplify. It is unlikely in a fraction-based question in probability that you're asked to simplify, but you could equally write that as a half if you wanted to also. So in this case, both of these answers are acceptable. But I'll also point out as well, you could equally write that as 50% or 0.5 using the decimal or the percentage ways of doing things also. But for now, we'll just get some practice writing probabilities as fractions. Put some questions at the end of the video here to attempt also to get plenty of practice, and anything you're unsure about, just ask, and we will go into the topic of probability in more depth in the later lessons.